First, want to honor all the elders in the room. You know this place, this land, this space before this space existed, and we're grateful for your lived experience and what you teach us and the stories that we get to pass on to the next generation. And that next generation is also here in the room. I know there's some students from City College of San Francisco. Stanford will be joining us. SOMCAN, Soma Filipinas. We're glad you're here. I also need to call out the women in the room, the mothers, the aunties, the grandmas, the sisters, the nieces. We are strong, we are resilient, and we find the creative ways to move our families and our people forward. So we welcome you to YBCA. We hope you'll make this your home too, and that you'll return again after tonight with shared values of interdependence, intergenerational gatherings like tonight, intersectionality. Collectively we can, and I know we will, change civic policy, and we will decolonize some minds, hopefully, and nurture the culture that we know we need. So with that, I get to read the bios of Jerome and Jose. So Jerome Reyes, who lives and works between Seoul, Korea, and his native San Francisco, is an artist, researcher, and educator who addresses ideas of architecture, public space, and cultural difference. He's a faculty at Stanford University's Institute for Diversity in the Arts. He has an MSA from Stanford University and has made projects for the Prospect 3 Biennial, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. He's been awarded residencies at the National Museum for Modern and Contemporary Art, Korea, Gwangju Biennale Foundation, Asia Cultural Center, Seoul Museum of Art, and received the 2016 Artist in Residence Award here at YBCA. He's received support from the National Endowment for the Arts and awards from the Joan Mitchell Foundation, Art Matters Foundation, Creative Work Fund, and the Center for Cultural Innovation. Recent projects include Asia Art Archive, Hong Kong, a book chapter in the forthcoming volume Public Space, Contested Space, University of Massachusetts Press, 2019, and an upcoming artist publication with Ybca for the Third Line in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. That's Jerome. And Jose Antonio Vargas is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, and a leading voice for the human rights of immigrants. He's the founder and CEO of Define American, the nation's leading nonprofit media and cultural organization that fights injustice and anti-immigrant hate through the power of storytelling. His memoir, Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, was published by HarperCollins in the fall of 2018. In 2011, the New York Times Magazine published a groundbreaking essay he wrote in which he revealed and chronicled his life in America as an undocumented immigrant. A year later, he appeared on the cover of Time magazine worldwide with fellow undocumented immigrants as part of a follow-up story that he wrote. He then produced and directed Documented, a documentary film, feature film of his undocumented experience. It aired on CNN, streamed on Netflix, and received a 2015 NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Documentary. Also in 2015, MTV aired White People, an Emmy-nominated television special he produced and directed on what it means to be young and white in a demographically changing America. His accolades are many, and he is passionate about the role of arts in society and promoting equity in education, and he serves on the advisory board of the DREAM, a scholarship fund for undocumented immigrant students. He's a product of the Bay Area, and he's a proud graduate of San Francisco State University, and he is an alumnus of the year. He was named Alumnus of the Year in 2012, and he's a Mountain View High School graduate, year of 2000. So after our conversation here tonight, please join us down in the Grand Lobby. Local bookstore Alley Cat Books is selling copies of Dear America, and then Jose will be available to sign. So with that, I'd like to introduce Rachel Lastimosa from Soma Filipinas.
Magandang gabi sa iyong lahat. Welcome to Soma Filipinas. Thanks to YBCA for having us. We're excited for tonight's program with Jerome and Jose. Ako si Rachel Lastimosa. I'm a composer and producer and serve as the Arts and Culture Administrator with Soma Pilipinas, San Francisco's Filipino Cultural Heritage District. Recently, give a hand. Recently, we received the National Endowment for the Arts, our town grant. Soma Pilipinas is in the heart, bolstering our visibility and peacemaking efforts within the district. For those who aren't familiar with the Cultural District, we were designated by the city in 2016 and by the state through the California Arts Council last year. I would be remiss not to mention that this designation stands on the shoulders of a 100-year-long history of Filipinos in San Francisco, particularly in Soma. Our mission is simple, and I'll provide some highlights of the work that's being done by our broad coalition of direct service providers, residents, workers, families, and artists. Number one, socioeconomic justice for the Filipino community. Through advocacy efforts, we worked alongside other cultural districts to present a cultural district legislation that was unanimously passed by the board this past spring, enabling other marginalized communities to form their own districts in this ever-changing city. We've worked tirelessly alongside YBCA, SF MoMA, the Symphony, and other arts institutions through the Prop E Arts Coalition to ensure funding for the arts and cultural districts through hotel taxes. Activation of space at the San Francisco Mint and Chronicle lot has led to strengthening economic activity, drawing thousands nationally through the undiscovered night markets featuring local and international Filipino music, arts, culture, food, and vendors. Number two, preservation and community development. Soma Pilipinas is home to the highest density of Filipino-American neighborhood services, residents, businesses, cultural assets, and legacy art organizations like Kearney Street Workshop, the first ever Asian American arts nonprofit in the nation. Yep, and Bindlestiff Studio, the only Phil-Am black box theater in the country. Organizations such as South of Market Community Action Network, also known as SOMCAN, Bill Soro Housing Equity Program, Bayanihan Equity Center, Filipino Senior Resource Center, Galing Bata, West Bay and United Players work diligently to support the needs of our residents, whether they are facing eviction, in need of housing, direct services, equity, after-school programming, you name it. We recently worked with the Mayor's Office and Mission Housing to preserve the Grand Oriente Hotel in South Park, a property that was purchased in the 1920s by a Filipino fraternity at a time when people of color weren't allowed to own buildings. This historic property will continue to serve the community as affordable housing for our elders. Number three, visibility and cultural celebration. With approximately 400,000 Filipinos currently residing in the Greater Bay Area, the contributions of Filipinos to this region are too many to name. Tagalog is the third most used language in California, and nearly half of the entire Filipino population in the country resides here in the Golden State. That being said, Soma Pilipinas has made it a priority to celebrate our culture and bring awareness to our existence. Our first Soma Pilipinas mural was unveiled as a partnership with the Filipino Mental Health Initiative and a Pinay business owner at Mestiza. And if you remember to look up when you're walking the streets of Soma, you'll notice our awareness banner campaign with 300 banners that feature residents, workers, artists, service providers, and youth, many of who are in this room, who reflect the strength and tenacity of who we are as a cultural district. Next Saturday, Cool Arts and the Filipino American Development Foundation will be presenting the 16th annual Parole Festival, a gathering of lights, right across the street at Jesse Square for all to enjoy. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the work that's being done here. What we commonly say at Soma Pilipinas is, what's the good of having a cultural district if there are no cultural bearers left to reside in this space? The displacement and lack of cultural equity, despite our contributions, is nothing new to our community. The very land we stand on is Native Ohlone Ramaytush land, whose population is nearly decimated today. On this very land, thousands of working class people, families, seniors, newcomers, and Filipinos were displaced in the 70s for the Yerba Buena redevelopment. Since the colonization of the Philippines by the US in the late 1800s, migration of Filipinos to the US has been directly correlated to US immigration policies. Waves of Filipinos moved to the US to support various industries and various military efforts. Today, 6,000 Filipinos leave their home daily to work abroad, with people being the #1 export of the Philippines. In Soma Pilipinas, we strive to make sure that our community gets the support they need in a variety of ways. Jerome has had a long history working with the Soma Pilipinas Coalition through South of Market Community Action Network. His billboard, commissioned through Ybca, echoes Soma Pilipinas' values, and it exists within our district. At the bottom of the billboard, there's a Victoria Manalo Draves quote. "She's a person who faced racial inequity and is a Soma hero." Victoria Manalo Draves Park is a community victory, an asset that is home to Tim Figueres' batting cage, another community hero. Through today, the park and VMD's legacy is under threat of being casted by a literal shadow of hyperdevelopment in this district. The fight continues. We are looking forward to hearing more about how Jerome and Jose are contributing to the narrative of the Filipino-American experience and contributing to our collective struggle. Thank you.
Good evening. It's great to see all of you. If you look around the room, you probably know a lot of people in the room. I will say publicly, I rigged the room to look like this. I bought 30 tickets. I have 20 comps. You deserve to be in this room. I will give you my Venmo information after this. Y'all fucking ready? All right, so I've been in calls a lot with Rachel during the week to set that as kind of the place setting for how the talk is. So I'm gonna give you a very, very quick artist talk, moving through the formalities of the billboard, and then I'll get Jose on stage. We've been working on this for a year to try to get us here at the same time. He travels everywhere in the country. I live in Korea, so it's been a year, but I think it's been worth the wait in this regard. So, when I won the Ybca Residency Award 2016, there was a backroom conversation of like, you can get the surface billboard, what can you try to do with it? So I wanted to make this billboard across multiple themes, and featuring both text and altered photographic imagery from San Francisco's Ocean Beach, because I grew up on 42nd Avenue near the beach. I took that photo with my iPhone 6. But really, if you look at it, it's the edge of the country and it's the edge of San Francisco, right? So in this side of redevelopment and displacement that Rachel said so eloquently, which I love, I think that that was the starting point, but also one thing that you see in the area is a Martin Luther King waterfall. That was the focus of it, and that's what I really wanted to work on, because I will give you some brief art history. In 1992, a mentor of mine, Daniel Joseph Martinez, who lives in Irvine, had a project in the 1993 Whitney Biennial of buttons that said, "I can't imagine ever wanting to be white." One of the most important projects ever in contemporary art history, which basically paved the way for generations of artists of color. This is what people don't know. He had a project before that across the street, and it was going to be a giant text that said, "This is a nice neighborhood." They got $500,000 to almost pull it off. Once they realized what he was really saying, they cut the job. It's the equivalent of probably 10 million right now. So he never got it up, but imagine if he got that up instead. Not at the Whitney, but across the street. So with this project, I told him behind the scenes, I'm gonna finish what you did 25 years later. So, that said, this is the title, where I get it from. Jose, get the photo. You have 100,000 Twitter followers. Many right-wing. Fox News. I need more followers. Okay, so looking back 7 years ago to the writing of our guest, Jose, his work has been a constant source of reflection and really a barometer of where the United States is at, which is no idea what it is. And here's his essay for the New York Times where he comes out as undocumented, his follow-up, We Are Americans, right after. I actually met Jose 7 years ago in the back room of the Commonwealth, literally 3 weeks after his article, and he told me, Jerome, I have no idea how this is gonna go, but I finally get to write about myself. And here we are with his book. The words that are at the top of the billboard say the last conversation in person he's had with his mother, Baka malamig doon, were among the few words that she said. Also included are the words of celebrated poet and activist Al Robles, who was an internal figure in the anti-eviction fight to save San Francisco's International Hotel, evicted in 1977 and demolished in 1981. His poetry reads, as the fog squeezed in, wailing sounds echoed. I had the pleasure of working with Tony Robles for months behind the scenes to get the copyright and figuring out. He couldn't be here, he's with his mother in North Carolina, but he said, Jerome, take a lot of photos with Jose and Photoshop my head in. I was like, I got you. A final quote by Olympic diver Victoria Manalo Draves, who grew up in the South of Market district, completes the project and recalls the athletes' famed memories of the night before her historic double gold medal victory in the 1948 Summer Olympics held in London. I prayed a lot. I was afraid of the water. She was studying her dives on the plane. Probably hitting the first time she's tried it, and then she won. She was the first Asian American Olympic champion, breaking both race and gender barriers for athletes to come, and was also honored with a public park in her name, as Rachel has said. So this is the medal ceremony, and I decided, well, I get my own ceremony, so this is the opening ceremony for the billboard. You may recognize almost everyone, if not everyone in the photo. Some of these people are in the room. Again, I like to rig things. The 4 young people on the left had no idea. I just said, you better dress up. So that is Gerald Yu, who's at Stanford. We had a black student union basically hustle him in. And I told him, can you go? And he's like, no, Jerome, I have finals. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. Claire is here, sitting in the front row, works at City Hall, poet, amazing. I text her a lot. That's my buddy Alexa next to her, her best friend. She was getting mad at me. She's like, oh my God, I'm in my pambahay. You didn't tell me I was gonna dress up. But she's there too. There's Maverick. He was going to prom. That's why he's dressed up. There is Ray. It's funny because it was originally going to be Angelica, who's the executive director. Ray comes up and does that thing of like, I think it's the Simpsons meme where the grandpa goes into the bar and puts his hat on. And then he just like gets up and goes out in the same movement. Ray was like, oh, she's at the church at a workshop. And I'm like, and Ray from Somcan. He's like, and he just like runs back. There's Tony Robles. There's Estella Ball from the IOTEL historian, and Dan Gonzalez, original 1968 SF State striker, faculty, founder of Ethnic Studies, Asian American Studies. He is here too. Take photos with him if you can. I'm all about ribbon cuttings. I want to have a closing on Jose. Since we have some news, you might be able to closing one too. We can cut it again. Abeyance shows the edge of San Francisco and the edge of the United States shifting by the second. These words of mother's love in the mother tongue of activist and athlete appear almost immaculately in the space that hovers between this ocean and sky, above our heads and below our feet, whispering to us the words she said that we can't remember alone. I actually didn't write that. That's my friend Yinchi, who wrote a really great article. I can't write like that. So the beginning of this billboard is equally the beginning of the book Dear America. And I'm happy to welcome on stage the author of Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, and winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and Mountain View's finest, Jose Antonio Vargas.
about Mountain View's finest. Google's there. I don't know. Stop. There's a lot of Filipinos here. Kamusta? Did anybody bring food? I stopped by Goldilocks today.
He wanted to do the whole talk in Tagalog, and I'm like, dude,
I could do this in Tagalog and Sambal. Would people here? Is anybody from Sambales? Sambales province. Ah, wala. Oh, okay, that's fine. This is my 49th book event since the book came out on September 18th. I highly apologize to Jerome and to the Yerba Buena Center because we've been trying to plan this for like a year and the calendar was just so crazy. And I think this is actually my last event actually no, wait, I go to Chicago, sorry. There was one more event. But I'm really happy to be here and really happy to be with someone who's like an artist with a capital A. Jerome's work is staggering, and he's young, which makes me mad.
I'm just 2 years younger than you.
I know, but a lot happens in 2 years.
That's true.
I wrote that book in 8 months, you know, so a lot happens in 2 years.
We're going to talk about a lot of that. I mean, you're Bay Area, so.
So I'm just really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Okay. So, I over-prepared, as I usually do, watching so many videos of Jose's book tour stops with amazing, amazing journalists, and I'm like, how am I going to arrange this? And I was just like, I just gotta be me. And we had this lovely text chat last night, getting ready. He's like, oh, I want to talk about this stuff being Filipino. No one really asked me, and I'm like, okay, I got you. But then we got to talk about like Filipino anti-blackness. We got to talk about like in relation to white ideology, all that stuff. And then I slip in. Were you 105.3 or were you like 106 KMEO?
You're 106 KMEO.
106 KMEO, right? Yeah. Okay. So, as a expert on white people, which like MTV has billed you as, but okay, let's be real. I mean, we're in a mainstream institution. Jose and I looking the way we look, and this wonderful conversation with Jeff Chang. How often are you going to see this of us talking about America in this way? And the rarity of that, and he just nods his head. So I just have to throw the question first, like, how has this book, in the way that you've written it, had this like public therapy in a way? What has it done to your relationship to being Filipino and Filipino-American? In that, after I read it, I'm like, oh my God, this incredible individual's making his life more complicated because now it's all unpacked. Like, how do you actually, not even to answer that, but what has that state gotten you into? Because you wrote this book in a very specific way around the country, and now you've been on all these tour stops, but you're in a room that looks like this. This is not North Dakota. This is not Ohio, where you had a lot of events. This is not the churches that you've been in. This is a very distinct, the Mecca in many ways.
And I did not invite my family here, because it would have been too much. You know, I told my 4titas was trying to come, and I was like, no, it's sold out. We don't need you here.
We were trying to get them in. I was like texting in the morning, like, I got two, Dan Gonzalez got two.
It's, I think a few of them finally read the book and are upset about it in one way. Because, you know, in our culture, there's this thing called hiya, right? Nakakahiya. It's too embarrassing. It's too shameful. Did you actually put that down? Did you? And I was like, and I was nice. I mean, I could have gone like, maalala mo kaya deeper. I was like, I'm not gonna go telenovela on you on this, you know. And but I have to say, just because Jerome and I have been talking about it, it's very important for me as a writer, as a person who creates things, to be seen as someone who creates things. Like, I'm not like a walking immigration reform issue, right? And I've done, I think it's 49 book events in the past almost 3 months, and this is only the third time that I'm being interviewed by someone who's Asian. The first time I'm being interviewed by someone who's Filipino. Yes. I was doing an event at USC, which was great, in LA. Did somebody say no? Oh, it was a great event because the moderator was Viet Nguyen, the novelist Viet Nguyen. And, you know, I did not know that Viet is the head of the creative writing program at USC. And our entire conversation as two Asian writers was how Black writers influenced us. And the whole conversation was about writing. It wasn't about immigration reform. So that was really, for me, been great. That's why I was looking forward, and I'm looking forward to this event, because I think, you know, I remember when you contacted me about this, there's not a lot of things I can share with my mom. Just because, you know, it's complicated, right? But like taking a photo of this and like a video of this during one of the pistahans, you know those pistahans there? Yeah. And I took a picture and sent it to my mom, and she was just like, she couldn't believe that it was like a piece of art. So I guess to publicly say thank you for that, to taking something that's so painful and, you know, something so specifically Filipino, and like transcending what that specific thing is. And you're right, the book starts with it, and in the book even, someone was telling me that this is a lot of Tagalog in an American book. And when it went through the copy editing process at HarperCollins, there's no one who speaks Tagalog at HarperCollins. So I had to copy edit my own Tagalog, and of course my cousins, you know how the cousins are. Jose Ton, that's my nickname. Pepe Ton, that's my name. My name is Pepe Ton. Ton, I saw 2 mistakes in the Tagalog translation. It was like, you know, right? I love that they like pointed out the mistakes right away. But I'm like, yeah, because I didn't know like the tenses in some of the Tagalog words. But yeah, I'm really proud that the book, and also you're probably wondering why it's yellow. It's yellow because I'm Asian and everybody thinks I'm Latino, so let me pick the most Asian color. It's totally true. And it's also yellow because one of the colors of the Philippine flag, one of the colors is yellow. So it's my own way of kind of tipping to where I come from. So, yeah.
That said, we were checking in the back and just hanging out, and it was great, but can you read the first chapter for us?
Okay.
Gamblers.
Okay, so this is the first chapter of the book that my lolas did not like, because I come from a family that goes to Thunder Valley and Grayton like every other weekend. They catch the bus for free to go. And I'm the person, as penance, I take about 4 lolas to Vegas every 6 months. You should follow it on Instagram. The hashtag is Lolas in Vegas. And then I give them like slot machine money for 3 days. And there's a 24-hour Starbucks where I can work at. So, but I don't know why. My family, maybe because for Filipinos, it's like, coming here is a gamble. So maybe that's why sitting in front of the slot machine and playing, you know, poker, kind of like it's posoy, is, yeah. So, the first line of the book is, I come from a family of gamblers. And my future, it turned out, was their biggest gamble. Everything about the morning I left the Philippines was rushed, bordering on panic. I was barely awake when Mama snatched me from bed and hurried me into a cab. There was no time to brush my teeth, no time to shower. A few months prior to that morning, Mama had told me the plan. We were going to America. I would be going first, then she would be following in a few months, maybe a year at most. Until that drive to the airport, Mama and I were inseparable. She didn't work because I was her work. She made sure I was doing well at school. She cooked every meal, usually a fried egg with Spam for breakfast. And if I was good, her special spaghetti dish with chicken liver. On weekends, she dragged me to her card games and mahjong games. Our apartment was so tiny that we shared a bed. I was Mama's boy. It was still dark outside when I arrived at Ninoy Aquino International Airport. For reasons she would not explain, Mama couldn't come inside the terminal. Outside, Mama introduced me to a man she said was my uncle. In my ragtag family of blood relatives and lifelong acquaintances, everyone was either an uncle or an aunt. After handing me a brown jacket with a Made in USA label in its collar, a Christmas gift from her parents in California, the grandparents I would soon be living with, Mama said matter-of-factly, "Baka malamig doon. It might be cold there." It was the last thing I remember her saying. I don't remember giving her a hug. I don't remember giving her a kiss. There was no time for any of that. What I do remember was the excitement of riding in an airplane for the first time. As the Continental Airlines flight left the tarmac, I peeked outside the window. I had heard that my native Philippines, a country of over 7,000 islands, was an archipelago. I didn't really understand what that meant until I saw the water and the clusters of islands down below. So much water, embracing so many islands, swallowing me up as the airplane soared through the sky. Whenever I think of the country I left, I think of water. As the years and decades pass, as the gulf between Mama and me grew deeper and wider, I've avoided stepping into a body of water in a country that I now call my home. The Rio Grande in Texas, not too far from where I was arrested. Lake Michigan, which touches Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, states with big cities and small towns that I've visited in the past few years. And the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. I'm the kind of person who goes to Miami and Hawaii without ever going to the beach. When people think of borders and walls, they usually think of land. I think of water. It's painful to think that the same waters that connects us all divides all of us, dividing Mama and me. I left the Philippines on August 1st, 1993. I was 12 years old. So, can I just talk about process? I
was going to ask you that.
So, this chapter is about a page and a half long. It's no more than 470 words. There's a version of this that's 2,000 words long that went on for about 20 pages. Because the reporter in me was like, what was going on in the Philippines? Fidel Castro was the president. Who was he? What was happening in like kind of the Southeast political kind of, economic reality? Was Sharon Cuneta still popular? I was a Nora Honor person. Was Vilma Santos still, Because the reporter in me wanted to just give so many details. I interviewed my cousins who I grew up with. Like, what did my mom tell you guys? Like, what did she say where I was going? I tried really hard to talk to my mom about what happened that day, what she was wearing, because that's the reporter in me. And then I wrote that version of it, but then it didn't seem authentic to the experience, right? So I wanted to kind of write about it as I experienced it and what stood out. And so then that's why I gravitated towards water, right? Like I thought that was from a literary point of view, I thought it was a way to kind of take this outside of myself. And then that began the process of how do I write this book in a kind of rhythm, in the kind of language that would speak to what the past 25 years have been for me in this country, which is I go from one thing to the next. Like somebody said, this book, I read this book in one sitting. It felt like you were in a rush. And I said, yes, because that's what it's been like. So I wanted that feeling of like rush, this feeling of being transient, this feeling of being transitionary. The longest parts of the book are all written when I was in airplanes, because that's the only time where I'm not bothered by anything, right? So I'm either flying from West Coast to East Coast or East Coast to West Coast. So I wanted to just be, real with the experience. But yeah, I'm glad that I did that, or else this book would have been 20,000 words longer, and I don't think it would have been better, but yeah.
No, I'm glad because that was the next question, the form of it, and it's choppy, and I remember I read it in one sitting. I was actually at SF State for Memorial for arguably, our greatest historian.
Dawn?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know her. We just messaged on Facebook. Yeah, where all the Filipinos go.
Yeah. So like it was really a super meta moment for me, reading everything and going and trying to figure out like this new document of history that was being made, in that it's incredibly readable. I think it can be taught in college and high school now. Like it's that. My point with that is that as I was reading it, and how graceful and light but deep, and we really understand who you are very early as a human being. And your reporting chops, which I knew going in, you abandoned that in a great way to let so many people in.
Thank you. Because a lot of the cutting was too many facts, Jose. Too many. I have one chapter here, literally called Filipinos, which is like 8 pages long, and somebody said, this has to be the tightest explanation of Philippine history. I had a version of it that was 30 pages long.
You gotta tell the editor part. Like,
oh,
you sent me last night, I was like, oh my god, that's some whack
So I have
shit.
this fantastic editor, because the publishing industry is probably the whitest thing I've ever experienced. And I love white people. I made a film called White People. I love them. I grew up with them. I'm from Mountain View. I'm not from Daly City. So all the editors, because thankfully a lot of publishers wanted the book. So I talked to like 8 editors who wanted the book. And I settled on this editor because I could tell that she wanted to make sure that the book isn't just an immigration book, right? Because immigration books, people don't read immigration books. And I'm telling you this as somebody who's read 40 immigration books. Before I started writing, I read 40 books about immigration. From like theoretical, conceptual, history, memoir. I read a lot of them. Because I wanted to know what was out there, because I'm a nerd, and I want to know that. And then I settled on this woman who I'm not gonna name the woman. She's wonderful. And she's edited a lot of big books. But the Filipino chapter, when I turned it in, she actually took a red pen and crossed it out and put yawn.
And he sent me the photo.
I sent her the photo.
And I was like, are you serious?
Actually, as a gift to her, I printed it out and put it in a really nice Tiffany frame. Because it's like a really nice parting gift,
You told me on the text, like, if this was about Irish, like, I wouldn't have
So
to
it is that, but it was a perfect moment to kind of talk about, you saw the Toni Morrison quote at the very beginning, right? Which I had typed in my computer when I was writing the book. And that quote really is very meaningful to me. And there's a whole chapter here called The Master Narrative that Toni Morrison, inspired. And my goal in writing the book was I didn't want to write the book as a marginalized person. It's tough enough to be othered than to have to other yourself while you're being othered. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to actually give myself permission to be at the center of it without feeling like I have to justify and explain myself to anyone other than myself. That sounds really selfish, but I think wrote the book for myself. I wanted to understand why I'm a hot ass mess. Like, I wanted to understand why I'm depressed, and I want to understand why no amount of success, whatever you define it, was enough. So I was telling my editor, I said, that is really offensive. If I had written it about the Irish or the Italians, I wonder if you had put yawn. Now, mind you, maybe the writing was poor, it wasn't tight enough, it didn't move, it was static, you can say that. But to cross out yawn? Do you know that there's 4 million of us? We've been here since 1763. Do you know that Rudyard Kipling wrote The White Man's Burden because of us? I did not know this until a few years ago. I mean, I thought Rudyard Kipling, James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, Kipling's poem is quoted in there. But it was an epigraph. It wasn't explained where it came from. But I just assumed that when Kipling talked about all those people who were half devil, half child, I didn't think he was talking about us, right? So I was really offended. But I think it's important when you get to moments like that where you kind of get to this point of understanding, why did she do that? And where do I stand? And it is my book. And there's going to be a chapter called Filipinos in the book. And there is. And I have to say though, I didn't know that, Jerome, did you know that Instagram is the #1 seller of books? It's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's Instagram. It's called Bookstagram, hashtag. You check it out when you're on Instagram. So I love how all of these Filipinos are actually taking screenshots of all the Filipino and the Tagalog in the book and just sending them to me and saying, I showed it to my classmate in Wisconsin. I just love that. I love that it's that there's a way to identify, that there's a way to say, oh, here we are, here's what kare-kare is, or here's what, but yeah, so that makes me really happy.
I think when you said that to me, that's when I asked him the 105 or 106 KML story. because of the way that you've rendered yourself in this so many dimensions. I have to give you credit, the way you also render everyone who helped you along the way, you render them with the same type of dimension, even if it's unresolved, of how they really felt helping you throughout the entire book. And that's why the most fun parts for me, among many, is you growing up and you going to high school in Mountain View. And that's why I was like, okay, what did he wear? Like, you're wearing a Fila shirt in like your documentary. I was like, what was he really like? Because I have to say, just to jump back to the billboard, the team working on it, no one was from the United States, but they studied all the stuff you had out with white people, undocumented. It was, and I'm really proud of this, it was an Australian friend who was a curator at the Shanghai Biennial. It was a person from Hong Kong who was in the Guangzhou Biennial, a friend from India, and I'm like, I need this to read to anyone walking in the street seeing this. And then they studied everything, and then I get a text from my friend in Australia. She's like, I'm crying. And I'm like, why? And I'm thinking it's a part in the movie where you finally see your mom, or like you're going around. And she's like, no, it's the start, and it's Lola's kitchen, and I saw the foil all over the kitchen, and that is me. And then I see you like on Instagram, and you're like pranking your Lola or something, but you have all this foil around, which like my family used to have. And I think those are the moments in the book where your family's trying and you're trying, and these people that help you. And it was really strange to me because it was like all white people, and I'm like, is this Mountain View? Because here in the Bay Area, I always do this thing, and if Bong is in the room, I've actually asked him this question too. Is 4 to 6 p.m. the most revolutionary time in our history? And it was like, what do you mean? That's when all the after-school classes are. When teachers and artists get their first job, often people of color, you're unregulated. You can go ham and do whatever you want. That's when student groups meet. That's when people get together and design the future of the school. Was the future of POC Bay Area designed from 4 to 6 p.m.? Of people from UC Berkeley, SF State, all coming together after class, after work to do the real stuff they really wanted to do. When I read that, I was like, he just got the white version with all these people helping him.
No, but I wonder though.
Just to get this in, I didn't see them as white. I just saw them as people helping you, and it's great because my barometer of how you can see the rest of the country, you know what it's like for a place to take care of you. They just happen to be white, which is one way of looking at it. But for me, that was a super interesting part because it's not even just the Bay Area. You've been getting help throughout this entire time, and you render white people in this way. So this is a real question. You render them in this really fair way of like, this is their America too. Let's give credit to the people who are helping us because they bought into you lying or passing all that, and they risked their privilege too for you and for maybe for themselves. And for me, like walking away from the book with that, I was like, wow, this is like some real work being done. But like I had to ask you that because I'm like, you give a lot of fairness.
No one has asked me that. No one has pointed that out.
I told you I studied.
I know, yeah. No one has said that. It's been 47, 49 events. But okay, thank you for saying that because I was really careful about that in the book. You know, writing
I'm glad
about.
you put it in.
And I also, I'm sure you remember in part of the book when, you know, I talked about all those white people, and they literally call themselves my white family, right? And I'm staying in one of them because in my Lola's house, there's nowhere to sleep. So I sleep in Susan Sweeley's house because there's an extra bedroom. In the past, my Lola would have been like, oh my God, why are you sleeping at the Puti people's house? What is wrong with our house? You know, nakakahiya naman, you know, all the pity stuff that Filipinos do, you know? But now Lola knows Susan Sweeley because Susan Sweeley stops by the house and drops her cookies. So now she knows that I can just sleep at Susan's house and it's not some sort of a referendum on how crowded our house is with, you know, aluminum foil. You know what I mean? So now they're like,
absolutely.
Now they're people. But here's the thing that was really interesting to me that I would never have realized. So I always thought that my Filipino family was really nervous going into the white people's houses with all of our vinegar, all that pungent. I would have never thought that Susan Sweeley and Mary Moore and all those white people who raised me were also as nervous going into our house with their cheeses and their grapes and their wine. Do you know what I mean? So the very thing that I thought was a thing that we were scared about or anxious about was the very thing that they were anxious about. So then it's not about Filipino or white. It's just about being human. And where do we meet? And that's why in the book I made a comment about when I was growing up and I was being helped by all these white people. I knew that they were white. I mean, clearly they had white skin, but I didn't really meet the real white people. The people who put you in your place, the people who have to put you on a side so they can be at the center, right? I didn't meet those people until I got to Washington, D.C. to work for the Washington Post. That's when I met the real white people. Here in Mountain View, I did not, and I don't know how that happened.
That was my next question. I love it. I mean, the one thing that stuck to me is like, can you just talk a little bit about this severance of the government leads to severance of self, which like stuck with me for like weeks after I first got the book read.
By the way, I'm still making sense of that. So because of Morrison's deep influence in me, I don't know if y'all read The Bluest Eye. And that was, as I say in the book, it was one of those landmark moments in my life when I was assigned to read that book in 8th grade. And you know, like, I'm really proud to have come from the Bay Area. Like, where else would they assign The Bluest Eye in 8th grade and have you read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States in like junior year in high school, right? And these are public schools in Mountain View. So I read the book and was totally, utterly confused by it, you know? Because of course in Filipinos, we know, I'm mestizo in the family, so I know what colorism is, but I didn't know what race was. Or like why a black girl would want to have blue eyes. And, you know, Morrison said, after I researched the book, she said that she wrote the book to show what happens when someone surrenders to the master narrative. And she said, what happens when a young black woman, a young black girl, believes that she's not beautiful? How does she take that in? Where does it go inside? So when I was writing the book, I wanted to ask myself, like, how does illegality or the concept of not being seen and recognized, clearly I'm very, very visible, I'm right here, right? But the fact that I can't vote, the fact that there's so many things that I cannot participate in, right? Under the government. Like, if you think of the government as a contract between the person and the government, I'm not at all in contract. I'm like, you know, even though I'm probably the most privileged and documented immigrant in this country, there are many things that I can't do. So then I wanted to ask myself, what happens when the country says, or a government or a country says, you're not really here, you're not really a part of us. So then how does that person take that in? And again, this is why that question of the severance from the government, how does that translate to the self? And in many ways, I think I sought to answer that in the book. And the kind of invisibility that comes with, you know, like there was that one part of the book, I wrote this down, and after I wrote it, I wrote the book on Airbnbs across the country. I think I was in Philadelphia. I wrote this part of the book where the great thing about being a journalist was my name could be on the newspaper, but I'm not even supposed to be here. So I wrote the article, but I'm not really here. I wrote it, my name's on it, I reported it, I talked to the people, but I'm not really here, so it's not really mine. So what kind of psychological shit is that? Right? But again, I wanted to create language around that, and I think it goes beyond DACA or immigration reform or amnesty. Then it's about the human condition. It's not about policy or politics.
I just love how he's just ending on like the next question.
I'm sorry. And he did not tell me these questions, so I don't know.
No, this is amazing. So I would like you to read again because you stopped on the point. Page 140 on migration is something that you've been citing. You just read it to the United Nations.
Oh, wait, this is hilarious. So I was invited to the United Nations. I was like, okay, can I go inside? I was inside, and of course they sat me. It was this big contest of like video film storytelling, and one of the winners is this young Filipina, and she was being awarded by this young Filipino filmmaker who flew from the Philippines just to go to the UN, and he directs those romantic comedies that ABS-CBN does. I forgot his name, but we're Facebook friends now. What page was it? 140.
140. What drives people to migrate?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. You tweeted a lot.
Teka lang.
Okay, look.
India.
That's my book. I think it's why it might be worn.
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay.
Okay.
So I read this at the United Nations in front of 400 people. Most of them are UN people, a lot of older people, white people, which is great. So this is what I read. Migration is the most natural thing people do. The root of how civilizations, nation states, and countries were established. The difference, however, is that when white people move, then and now, it's seen as courageous and necessary, celebrated in history books. Yet, when people of color move, legally or illegally, the migration itself is subjected to question of legality. Is it legal? Is it a crime? Will they assimilate? When will they stop? There are an estimated 258 million migrants around the world, and many of us are migrating to countries that previously colonized and imperialized us. We have a human right to move. This is when the room got really, really quiet. And governments should serve that right, not limit it. The unprecedented movement of people, what some people would call a global migration crisis, is in reality a natural progression of history. Yes, we are here because we believe in the promise of the American dream, the search for a better life, the challenge of dreaming big. But we are also here because you were there. The cost of American imperialism and globalization, the impact of economic policies and political decisions. During this volatile time in the US and around the world, we need a new language around migration and the meaning of citizenship. Our survival depends on the creation and understanding of that new language. Quiet. It's okay, you can be quiet too. But what I'm getting at here, I won't read all of that, but like even this question of who gets to be an expat and who's a refugee, right? The language around migrant versus immigrant versus asylee versus like we have bastardized language to a point that I don't think people really even understand the distinctions between all those words. And what I'm getting at, and as a journalist, what I find myself most offensive about is, you know, every day we hear about immigration, and yet it's very rare that any journalist actually asks the question of why. Like, why are they moving? Right? And actually interrogating what the push-pull factors of migration are. I was on Fox News before the midterms, because I like to do that sometimes. And the host was talking about the caravan. And then so I started talking, you know, how did President Reagan's policies during the 80s and the fact that he wanted to get rid of communism, how did that impact how we treated El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras? And the host was like, what are you talking about? That's what I'm talking about. The fact that you won't even acknowledge it and face it is a part of why we're here. So, to me, and you know, one thing I haven't even mentioned is climate change, right? Like, the Philippines, right? The archipelago, how many islands are going to disappear? Where are those people going to go? The 258 million people, like, that's why the word citizen is underlined. Like, how do we decide who welcomes us? What constitutes citizenship? All those people, and you know, this is why America, what we're going through is so crucial, because in many ways we have been a leader at this historically. We have said that you come to America, you become American. That's not the French experience. That's not the German experience. Go to Sweden, right? So if we can't figure this out, and this is why, now this might sound controversial, you may boo me, which is fine. I do believe in this notion of American exceptionalism. I think the fact that people can come to this country and claim it as theirs, the fact that this is a country that is not about blood or soil, but it's about the idea of America. Like, that is what was revolutionary. And when I think of this era that we're living through, which it can't get any worse, which it might, I would hope that the silver lining is that we are now maybe going back to the root of what America was founded on. What ideas we're actually fighting for, right? I don't know what else is gonna have to happen until we have to face all of that, but I think that's where we are. One last thing about the globalization thing. So after I finished the book, you know, they had to create the cover, and the copy editor was like, "Are you sure there's no accent in Jose?" I was like, "I don't know. I mean, Jose Rizal had an accent, but when I was a kid, we never put accent on my name, right?" And so I couldn't just like bullshit my way through this copy editor. I love copy editors. So I contacted Anthony Ocampo, the Latinos of Asia. He teaches at, Pomona.
Nice.
Contacted him, texted him, and then he introduced me to a friend at Stanford University who, oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. I'm gonna remember it pretty soon because it's in the acknowledgements. Okay, wait. But he is an anthropologist, a linguist anthropologist, who got back to me 48 hours later and said, Jose, so after the Spanish-American War, when Americans went to the Philippines, their typewriters didn't have accent marks. So that's why your Spanish names don't have accent marks. So our Jose's and all of our names with the Enyes and the Yas, Padilla, all of that, it is the way that it is as a marriage of Spanish colonialism and American imperialism. Like that. So, I think those are the kind of things that we have to, that scratches the surface of something that we need to kind of dig deeper in. I am right now working on a project that's going to piss off a lot of Filipinos, but it's okay. On whitening creams. My aunt, who I love dearly, I will not name her because I love her.
That's why they're not here.
That's what she's not here.
No, he texted me in the morning like, Jerome, it's okay. I'm like, I got 4. He's like, no.
But
really
one
okay.
of my aunt a couple of years ago, I was home and she was applying this like lotion in my cousin's neck. And I was like, what is that? She bought it at the Korean store, and it's this whitening cream because apparently my cousin's neck is too dark. And so she must spend an hour just rubbing this thing. And I'm looking at her. I was an African American Studies major at SF State. I'm looking at her like, what? And this is my aunt. I love my aunt, right? I mean, you know, our aunties, we love them. You know? And I couldn't like, how do I talk to her about this without sounding didactic? You know? And so I say, okay, I'm going to make a... So I'm actually working on a project right now that kind of gets at colorism as colonialism and like what that... But a lot of Filipinos don't want to talk about this. But then again, I figured to myself, if I'm not, you know, if I'm undeportable, I might as well push as many buttons as I possibly can. But I think, Jerome, and you're a part of this movement. Like, we are now a part of this, like, Filipino. I think there's a different kind of presentness. There's an intergenerational conversations that are happening in our households. And my hope is that I could help make things that could incite some really uncomfortable conversations, you know, while we eat the pancit, you know what I mean? It's like, what do we talk about? And I'm hoping that it would incite some conversations.
Yeah, and I think it's a really, I mean, I have too long of an answer for that, but it's also this, you can be as Filipino as you want. And I mean, if you look at it, that's essentially 100 years. I mean, if you think about how old Victoria Manuel Draves was, and I was like having some fun conversations with friends, like, I'm gonna try to get it all in one shot, in 28 words. The essence of it, the feeling of it. And what's great is that, like, you can't, but it poses the challenge, okay, all of you fill in what I missed. And it can happen. And this got $25,000, as making much of it as public as possible, to where now foundations, and I had the conversation with Rachel, I was like, you gotta put NEA in the front. The district is a national model. I was like, I think it was last night after I had texted with Jose, and I was like, oh my God, 106 came out, that's what he really likes. I thought you were 105. It was the...
Whoa! Okay, we're not gonna investigate that.
No, because the Alanis Morissette part on the tape, I was like,
you know, you ought to know. I want you to know that I.
okay.
I wish everything was for you both.
Right, but I did see a video you were saying Tupac and all that, so it was kind of like I just had to ask.
Well, passing to me was like everything. You have to absorb all of that. You know, I recently met Michelle Kwan. This is really funny. And I thanked her and told her that she was my introduction to classical music. Because whenever they skated, at the bottom, what are they skating to? Who the hell is Rachmaninoff? And what is Concerto No. 2 in C minor? Right? And of course I go to the library and be like, what's that? And it would be next to Debussy. Who the hell is that? Right? Or Prokofiev. Did you know that there's two versions of Romeo and Juliet, Tchaikovsky and Prokofiev? Yeah. So like that was part of the education of America, was like learning, you know, what 227 was. Regina King is amazing. And then knowing what Rachmaninoff is. So for me it was like you just swallow all of it.
Yeah, and I think that's why I love the book, because it's like I could relate to you being from the Bay Area, being close in age, figuring out like, okay, I was watching everything again years later to get ready with a completely different lens, documented white people, all of that. And the fact that this book is out and that you pose an example, because you can't represent all Filipinos, that's just ridiculous.
Oh, no. I'm sure.
But what it does is it expands like the fun things of like you have all these idiosyncratic things that you love about who you are and what you do. It's just going to basically explode and exponentially grow as an example, because like Filipinos love you. At least the ones I talk to, they want to hug you at your book events. Like, he is us. And I'm just like, well,
what's interesting about this though is even the people who want to deport me seem to like me. Like, you know what I'm talking about. Like the Filipinos who comment, like people who comment on my Instagram was like, I don't think you should be here, would like DM me saying, hey, if you're in Modesto, stop by. I make really good palabok. And I'm like, so, and I guess let me just say this, because you know we are amongst this crowd and I'm with you.
Right.
Oh gosh, because I'm about to do some things that are gonna be more provocative.
So,
and I'm, you know, unfortunately there aren't as many Filipinos publicly out there as there should be. There should be more. So, but because there's not that many of us, when I mess up or when I do something that, I remember when I made White People, there was this Filipino activist in Seattle who I guess was in a group of activists who thought that white people wasn't hard enough on white people. And she said it was so hard to defend me with her friend, to her friends. And I was like, I felt so bad. I called her, I got her number, and I said, please don't defend me. You don't have to do that. You know, like, I can be who I am and you can be who you are, right? Like, again, this is my way of saying, I'm sure I'm gonna do some things and I've already done some things that you're not happy about, but I'm human, I'm flawed, and I'm just trying to figure this out as I go along, you know? And that's why I have to tell you, Jerome, like when I first started this process 7 years ago, I wasn't sure I could do this because as a journalist, I know how this goes. I write about this. I know what America does to people. You become public, they put you in a pedestal, then they knock you down. Right? I don't want to be that. I know how that goes. Let's just skip over the pedestal and knocking part, and let's just be human. So my goal in the past 7 years has just been, here I am, you know, and I have to say, like, the love of Filipinos, even the uncomfortable ones, I'll be at the airport and be like, uy, you haven't been deported yet? And he would like, scream this out loud at the airport. And I'm like, hindi pa po, pero tumahimik naman kayo. You know what I mean? Because you know, Seattle, Chicago, that's like Filipino airports. There's like Filipinos everywhere. And they'd be like, psh, psh, like, you know, andito ka pa? I'm like, yes, andito pa ako.
But that's where we're at. And the thing that I wanted to say is that and I love how you talk about language, because like there is not a shared language like in media of like MSNBC and Fox, like they are basically taking from two different vocabularies, not even using the same imagery. But what I love is that we got you. You confuse both of them. You can go in and they can't prepare for you.
Oh, they can't!
And like take that on, because like you being yourself is the best you can do for all of us. All you create. You're getting away with so much shit.
I am getting away. But you know, but honestly though, this is the other thing. Like, I am so glad in a way that I started doing this work when I was 30. Meaning, you know, that's like, I'm a grown-ass man. You're not a young adult, you're just an adult. So, meaning, if I had done this when I was earlier, I think I would have been seduced to be one way. Like, if I wanted to be a pawn of the Democratic Party, that could be easy. I could be like, but I can't do that, right? Or I could just be on, you would be so tired of me because I'll be on CNN every 30 seconds talking to you about immigration. But as you can probably tell, I don't talk in sound bites. I talk with like dashes and semicolons. And cable news is not like that. You know, I have to be really picky when I go on cable news. I'm gonna be really diva about this. And it's the only thing that I'm kind of diva about. I don't go on television until they can guarantee at least 1 minute. And I'm usually not in a panel, meaning I'm not arguing with other people. I'm there to just give a point that's actually a paragraph. That's the only way I do TV. Otherwise, I don't do it. Because you don't need to hear me be in a panel yelling at somebody and losing my eyebrows in the process. No, right? So, but that's tough because most people are like, oh no, we want you to debate somebody who's anti-immigration or pro-immigration. But my life is not anti or pro-immigration. It's just fucked up immigration. So, sorry. But that's hard. But that's really harder to do, which is why the next projects for me are much more long form. And it's gonna be really uncomfortable. But I feel like creatively for me, that's the only way. I think I told you, Jerome, when I was writing this book, I had told my family that I was gonna leave. I wrote the book giving myself permission to leave. Like the way the book ends, it's like, you know. Because I thought I owed that to myself. I've been here 25 years, and I'm like, yo, like, I don't know. I've been so afraid that I'm always gonna just be the immigration guy, and I have other things I wanna do with my life. And so if I can't be creatively free, then I gotta go somewhere else where I can be. So then I wrote the book, and then now I feel much clearer about who I am and what I'm doing. So now, not only am I staying, I told you, I actually am moving to Berkeley. I moved tomorrow, Friday, Saturday.
This weekend.
I moved this weekend. So I'll be back in the Bay.
And I want to interject, Jose is going to get new art for his...
I have art from like a world-renowned artist person.
Yeah, whatever. So this is a test print that says water from the billboard. And we're going to do this like sports thing where you trade jerseys and you sign it, so he's going to sign my book while I sign this.
This is how we roll, dude. I mean, this could be Mahjong and Pusoy, but instead, we're like, this is amazing. But yeah, so I'm moving back to the Bay. You know, all of my nieces and nephews are here. All my aunts are here. I'll be in Grayton a lot, I know. Driving grandmas around. So no, I'm really, really happy to be here, and I'm really excited to engage all of the communities here, like all the Filipino artists here, all the educators that are here, the birth of ethnic studies in America, like all of that. As you can tell, I'm really proud about being educated from San Francisco State when it was $800 a semester. It was $800 a semester, Jerome. Yeah, I'm helping
high school there, I know, dude. I know.
So yeah, so I'm really happy to do that. So yeah.
Angela, let's have some questions from the audience. Please.
Uy, sa likod, sa likod. What's up?
What's up? Can you tell this room about your thoughts on the term TNT?
Does everybody here know what TNT means?
Yeah.
Tago ng tago, which is hiding and hiding. I have been trying to convince ABS-CBN with very little success, but now that I'm here, I'll be more annoying, about doing a special whole like series just on the TNT conversation among Filipino Americans and among the Filipino community. I think in many ways, the whole concept of that has been a real barrier to not only conversations, but just information. If you look at numbers of DACA recipients, for example, in California, Asian, Filipinos, Koreans are the least likely to apply for DACA, right? Even though they need help, because their families make them feel ashamed to have to ask for help, right? Or to even want to, you know, you have to remember, like in the state of North Carolina, where I was just at a couple of weeks ago, undocumented students can't go to community colleges. in the state of Georgia, undocumented students can't go to public colleges, only to the private ones. So the fact that we have undocumented Filipino students in the great state of California who can't go to college because we have this problem called DNT and this HIA thing, unacceptable. So I'm really hoping to kind of very politely but aggressively talk to ABS-CBN, and maybe we go to Seafood Cities and we just plop ourselves and get some celebrity to sing some karaoke song and we'll just do it. You know, that's the other thing, and I'm sorry, because, you know, I love our people. I hope it's very clear that I love being Filipino, but the other thing that I love about us, actually no, that I don't love about us, is just all of this celebrity stuff. It's kind of out of control. You know, it's completely out of control. Like, you know, and it's part of the whole colorism thing. It's part of the whole Hollywood thing. It's part of the whole... It'd be one thing if the celebrities actually get people engaged, right? At least register to vote or something. But no, it's just pluff, you know? So, and I'm sorry to say that because I loved Sharon Cuneta when I was growing up, but I was 11. You know what I mean? I'm a lot older now. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lilian Villarasa, actually.
Oh, I saw you the other day at the Commonwealth Club. Yeah, that was a totally different audience. What's up?
Thank you. I've been texting you like the last 3 weeks. It's been great.
So I love all of the stuff that you're talking about. I teach Philippine Studies.
Yeah.
Only department in the nation. I also teach history of immigration. And so one of the things that I find really interesting is all these contradictions, right, about talking about immigration in the Filipino community. Right? And I love the fact that there's this very passive-aggressive, I can't talk to my titas directly about colorism, so I'm going to make a documentary.
But isn't that amazing that I can go to Mississippi and be like protested by people, but I can't talk to my tita about it?
I think that there's definitely something, a larger conversation there, but my question is if you could go back to the Philippines and explain your situation to Filipinos there, how would you do that? Or what would you say? Sorry.
You're on your own.
She's a professor, right?
I teach art, I don't teach that.
So I'm gonna deflect a little bit and I'm gonna answer the question. So the deflection is this. Apparently the book is being published in Spanish. It might get translated to German, but I cannot get the book in the Philippines. Because apparently Filipinos do not read. Or at least they do not read books by people who are not celebrities. And I'm not a celebrity. I'm just like some person who can't get legal. So I'm a little bit disappointed about that. What would I say? I wish I had enough resources to start a whole organization called Define Filipino. Because in many ways, that colonial imperialistic history is still very much within the Filipino community, not only in America and the Philippines, but also in the diaspora. I think this idea of we don't quite know what we are or who we are. We know our food. This is why, like, I have a dear friend, Nicole Ponseca. Her book just came out, I Am Filipino, the cookbook. It's amazing. I literally finished my book and she finished her book in her apartment in Bushwick together. We will finish our book together. And I love that Nicole was really a bit at the forefront of the Filipino food movement, who's like, I am gonna charge $15 for palabok and I'm gonna call it palabok. And then the Filipinos come to the restaurant and they're complaining. They're like, at the tuno-tuno, that's like $7. Why are you charging 15? And Nicole's like, wait, how much do you pay for pad thai? Why is it that you're okay to pay for like uppity pasta and you don't want to pay $15 for palabok? Why don't you want to actually pay what kare-kare is worth? So again, there's this, it's this contradiction with our culture, which is so proud, and you saw whenever Miss Universe pageant comes into town, this really proud culture that is also very ashamed. There's that contradiction that I actually want to figure out what's at the heart of that, what at the core of that. But I would say, and this is theoretical, I think that experience of being taken over, that experience of having to be under someone else's rule, You know, I'm obsessed right now with comparing Indian history with Filipino history and what makes the two different. Outside of Shusmita Sen, who's the first Miss India to win the Miss Universe pageant in the Philippines. See, that's how much So I'm figuring that out. I'm figuring that out. And by the way, I hope I'm not being offensive when I say this, especially because there are many Filipino intellectuals and academics in this room. But I hope that that's something that's actually a project that might be really interesting to do in the Bay, which is intergenerationally defining what Filipino identity is and how we hold on to it. I hold on to it when I see someone like Jerome succeeding outside of what people would think of as a Filipino thing. No offense to all the nurses. I have like 7 aunts who are nurses, right? But we can't all be nurses, right? Or like my nephew the other day said, "Uncle, I think I'm gonna major in fine arts." And I was like, "What?" And I had to stop myself. I was like, oh my God, yes! Because in my head, I'm already thinking of all the titas and all the lolas who's gonna go, see what you did, Ton? They're not gonna blame me for her not having like a regular salary because Jose, I can write. And now I'm gonna badly influence, So I think it's generational. And I think this idea of how we define Filipino-ness, I would love, Jerome, maybe that's a project we'd all do together. Right? We can do like an entire actual series of conversations and actual tangible things out of that. But yeah, look at me like presenting projects already. I haven't even been moved in yet.
Questions. This is an incredibly brilliant crowd. I know their questions.
What's up? Hi. I was the one who shouted no at USC.
Why did you do that? There's some Filipinos at USC. I met 3 of them.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of my question.
Ginger?
Which is,
it is. Hey, Ramon.
That how do you contend with being like a person of color, like doing really good work, like you get into does good work, but in like an institution that's overall so white and so problematic.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna say something really controversial that you may hate. I don't know what people of color means anymore. I don't. Like I'm meaning I was watching the whole thing go down with Gina Rodriguez with the comment that she made about pay scale in Hollywood. You said a blow up on Twitter. I was gonna send her a message and I was like, Jose, no, control yourself, don't say anything. I just wanted to see how black people react to people of color and what that means. And then I want to go talk to all the white people I've met all across the country and ask them what kind of color they are and do they fit in the people of color thing. So there's that. I know that's not your question, but let me just say that. This is going to sound really, I don't know how. I like to do work that stands on its own in a way that no one could question why it exists. I don't want to have to do the work because I'm undocumented, I'm gay, and I'm Filipino. I want the work to be there because it's good. So craft is really important to me. I would also like to hope that all of the identities that we wear, whatever they may be, become an actual bridge to people and to the human condition, rather than, oh, you're not that, so therefore you can't do that. Does that make sense? So I try really hard. So when I walk into MTV and I said, I want to make a 1-hour special called White People, right? The idea was so solid that they couldn't poke holes on it. They couldn't go, oh, but you're coming from this Filipino perspective, and like, is this really commercial? Is this really? None of that was even the conversation. The conversation was, is this a necessary conversation? How you should be asking these questions, how much money do you need? So I know that might sound really privileged, but from where I come from, it comes from, and that's why I guess for so many people, I don't know why they haven't deported me. I really don't know. It's not like they don't know where I am. I'll be in Berkeley, next to the Whole Foods. Not too far from the Phil's Coffee, right? So I'm not hiding from them. And so long as I'm here, so long as I get to do these creative things that are not about, quote unquote, my identity per se, but about what I want to say to the human condition as an experience, I'm going to keep doing that. So I hope, how old are you? Oh, I'm sorry, now I'm aging you.
21.
You're so young. The whole world is open. Do you have a passport?
Yeah.
Yay! Right? Like, I wonder what happens to me when the whole world is available. The whole world is available to you. So I hope that as you, live through this, that you don't create barriers for yourself when the whole thing is available. Since we started with Baldwin, let me end there. One of my favorite quotes from Baldwin that Toni Morrison actually repeats a lot, which is very relevant to this crowd, given where we come from. Your crown has been bought and paid for. Your ancestors, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they already gave it up for you. It's already done. Now you can love yourself. It's possible. So I think our goal now is, how do we wear all of these crowns from all the sacrifices that our grandparents made when they couldn't speak the language and they couldn't make the palabok because there was no, curry in the store, right? Yeah. Are you okay?
No, I just had a question that I had there that we didn't get to say because I wanted to get it to the crowd of like, why haven't you been deported yet?
Oh.
I actually had my question with that, and it was an open one, maybe a possibility, but I just have to throw it. With the administrations, did Obama keep you here to say what he couldn't say, but wanted to say? And did Trump is keeping you here to fuel the fire for his re-election?
Oh, shit.
I told you I studied. Because I thought about that and I'm like, oh, that could be true, and it scared the hell out of me, but also the way that you understand media and the way your image is being really manipulated in all these ways
for their
benefit. I had to ask that, and like what you can do to combat that is to obviously be yourself and make your projects, but it was a conversation I had with all my friends for really these 7 years of like, why is he still here? And that's where I landed on, but I want to know your thoughts on that.
The Obama thing is actually quite complicated because I know Obama because I used to cover him. So for example, in the book, when I got detained, I had to actually understand why I was released. Like, how did I get out? And then when I found out how it happened, I felt really guilty about that. Like, I got out because people in the White House knew that I was detained and get him out. Well, how do I explain that to all those people who don't get out, who just get deported? And I remember that week when I got out, all of the hate mail from all of the immigrant rights people on my inbox saying, how dare you? If that was my dad, it would not have been breaking news on CNN. He would have been out. And yet you're here? That was really hard. So in writing the book, I had to face that. The Trump thing, I don't know. I don't really...
You think he's gonna win?
The birthright citizenship conversation is brilliant. It's constitutionally he can't do it, but you see the report, most Americans don't know what the Constitution says. So it's not about that. It's about saying these people are not Americans and we shouldn't make them automatic Americans because they don't even want being here. What a perfect thing to say to get reelected. And here's the thing that's really dangerous. I'm gonna really scare you now. This is really unprecedented in the history of like modern politics. Nothing that the Washington Post or the New York Times says matters. Nothing. They can do an entire year-long investigation on taxes to say that he has like skirted law. Nothing. It lands on a Friday, it's forgotten by Monday. Nothing that the media says that used to set the agenda matters. That to me is really dangerous because it means that there's no ground. It means that there's no collective. There is no... So, is he going to get reelected? I'm so sorry to say this. I think yes. A lot of that is because when you look at the Democratic Party and the fact that it's so good at arguing with itself, that it's going to kill each other before they even actually get to the finish line. So that, and also because I think this is going to get worse before it gets any better. You look at the history of the Reconstruction after the Civil War, and in so many ways we are living through a Reconstruction and a Civil War all at once. The difference is we're not white people, although some of us want to be. right? Most people who are immigrants here are Latinos and Asians, right? And so that makes it really complicated. So the only hope, because you're probably looking for hope, the only hope.
Yeah, I want to end on hope.
Cornel West says this. It's not a question of, having hope. I think it's actually a question of being a hope, of like living your life as hope, as hopeful, as becoming your own agency, to not have to wait for someone or something or an organization to do it for you. That's why in this book, the word citizen is underlined. I think we in this country require a different kind of citizenship. One last uncomfortable thing. After the election, I did an accounting of my aunts and my uncles. In my family, 18 people were eligible to vote. How many of them voted out of the 18? Just guess. Filipinos in my family.
3.
They're not that bad. 5. So then I interviewed my uncles and my aunts and my cousins. I'm like, what? One of my aunt who's in Santa Clara, Ton, I've sent your cousins to school, I own a Toyota Camry, I own a house, tapos na, I'm done. So America is something you eat, something you wear, something you consume. It's not something you participate in. So civic that's an uncomfortable conversation. Especially all the woke Filipinos here. Like, how do you talk to your aunts and your uncles and your cousins, right, who are here with papers and who can participate, who don't participate? Like, how do you get them involved? That, to me, is the big X factor. We saw it in the midterms, but the re-elect is a whole new can of worms. And I think it's going to require a different kind of engagement and citizenship within our immigrant community, especially in the Bay Area.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for coming. Please continue the conversation with Jose downstairs. Please talk with him. He's coming back, so hopefully you can meet with him in the future. Berkeley, he's working on a lot of stuff, but do let him know who you are. He's really set on meeting all of you. Again, this room was curated that way.